Hey there, viewers. Some stories take years to surface, and when they finally do, they leave more questions than answers. Today, Diddy's adopted daughter broke her silence and revealed what really happened behind closed doors. And the truth? It's worse than anyone imagined. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. She didn't know her name. They call me Client X. I guess that's what they write on the files here, with the little number in the corner and the tabs in soft colors. I asked once if I could pick something different, but the nurse said the label wasn't about me. It was about the process. That's the word they keep using here, process. The walls are gray, not white. People always think it's white in places like this, like some kind of clean cartoon hospital, but gray is quieter, softer, less likely to provoke. That's what the intake coordinator told me. I remember that part. Her voice was high and a little nervous, like she wasn't used to someone like me signing themselves in. She asked for my name. I paused. Then I said, I said one of them. She smiled like I passed some kind of quiz and jotted it down. "That's a beautiful name," she said, but it didn't sound right coming from her. It never sounds right, because I don't know which one of them is mine. I was 9 when I first got a new one. We were in the back of the black van, the kind with tinted windows and seats that face each other like a boardroom. He sat across from me in a suit that looked like it cost more than my old house. I was wearing a pink dress that someone picked for me. He looked me over and said, "Legacy, that's what we'll call you now. You like that?" I nodded. I'd learned to nod. He touched the side of my face, real slow, and said, "From this day forward, you are my daughter. Got it? But only when I say so." I said yes, because anything else would have been the wrong answer. I already understood how that worked. There was no paperwork, no courtroom, just a sentence and a signature on something I never saw. I didn't go to school after that. I didn't have a phone or books or even shoes with brand names anymore. All the brands came from him, from his designers, from his people. At first, the house felt like a castle. The windows were tall and the ceilings went up forever. My room was big, with heavy curtains and soft carpet, but the door only opened from the outside. I figured that out the first night when I needed the bathroom. I knocked 3 times. That was the rule, always 3. Never more, never less. A woman came and took me down the hall. She didn't speak. None of them did, not when they were in the house. It wasn't until the 3rd week that I realized there were no mirrors. Not in my room, not in the hallways, not even in the bathroom. I started to wonder if my face looked different now. Sometimes I'd press my palms against the window glass, trying to catch a reflection, but it was all too dark or too far. There was a painting in the hallway of a girl with her back turned. Every time I passed it, I wondered if it was supposed to be me. The first dinner was when I understood what being adopted really meant. It wasn't about being taken in, it was about being absorbed. In the dining room, everything was perfect. Long table, gold plates, white chairs. He sat at the far end, head of the table, with 2 women on each side. They all wore white, tight, quiet. I sat to his right. No one talked. The food was served cold. He told me to eat, but I couldn't move. The fork felt like it was too heavy, like it would fall out of my hand and shatter the whole illusion. One of the women next to him finally lifted her fork, just a small bite. Then another followed. It was like a choreographed dance, everyone waiting for someone else to make the first move. That night, I didn't eat. He didn't scold me. He just smiled and said, "Learning through silence. Good girl." I still hear that phrase, even now. The therapist here, the one they assigned me, asks me questions like she's assembling a puzzle she doesn't believe in. She leans forward with her eyebrows pinched, her pencil always ready. And you say your name was changed more than once? I nod. And you didn't have documentation? No school enrollment? No legal guardianship? I shake my head. Then how did people refer to you publicly? Did he introduce you as his child? I shrug. Sometimes. Sometimes I was his niece. Sometimes his muse. One time, he told a guest I was the future of his brand. The therapist blinks. Brand? I say it again, more carefully. Brand. That's how he put it. Like I was a product line that hadn't launched yet. She writes that down. I watch her hand move across the page. Sometimes I wonder what the file says. I imagine words like delusional, fabricated memory, trauma response. But the parts I do remember, they aren't flashes. They're whole rooms. The theater was my least favorite. He called it the lesson room. It had red seats and no stage, just a chair at the center, with lights pointing straight down. I had to sit there for hours sometimes, with voices playing through speakers. Different voices. His, mostly, saying the same lines over and over. You belong to me. Your silence is your strength. You are legacy. If I responded, I failed. If I cried, I was punished. But if I sat there, still, like a statue, sometimes he clapped. That's how I learned to disappear without moving. The therapist asks about punishments. I don't answer right away. It's not that I don't remember, it's that I don't have the right words for them. There were no beatings, no chains, nothing that would show. Just reduction. A door that didn't open. Lights that didn't turn on. Meals that never arrived. Being erased for a day or 3. And when I came back, the smiles were bigger, the applause louder, like I'd passed another test. I tell the therapist that once, during a dinner, a man I didn't recognize tried to shake my hand. He smiled too much, his teeth like piano keys. I looked at at him, and he didn't nod, so I didn't move. The man laughed and said, "She's trained well." Later that night, I was given a red dress instead of the usual white one. That was supposed to be a reward. I didn't wear it. That's the night the curtains were taken down from my room. I asked the therapist if any of this sounds familiar, if she's ever heard of something like this before. She just stares at me for a long moment and says, "Not outside of novels or cult literature, no." But this wasn't a cult. It wasn't a novel. It was a system. A system that had sound engineers, wardrobe consultants, stylists, trainers, handlers. A system with secret cameras, password-only elevators, rooms you didn't enter unless told to. A system where my only job was to not break character, even when I wasn't given one. The therapist leans back and sighs. "You keep using the word rehearsal. What do you mean by that?" I look at the corner of the room. There's a tiny red light on the ceiling, probably a smoke detector. Or a camera. I don't answer right away. Instead, I whisper, so quiet I'm not even sure it's audible. Said I was rehearsal. She looks confused. She opens her mouth, then closes it. I repeat it, barely louder. He said I was rehearsal, not the show. Not the finale, just the run-through, a test to see if the next one could do it better. I don't think she wrote that part down, but I know she heard it, just like all the others did and chose not to. Chapter 2. The House with Too Many Rooms. They told me not to use names, said it wasn't necessary, that I could just refer to him as the client, but everybody knew who it was. You don't pour that kind of money into a private estate unless you're trying to keep something in or someone out. I was hired on short notice. No bidding process, no walkthrough, just a contract slid across a table in a hotel lounge and a non-disclosure agreement the size of a phone book. The guy who gave it to me never said his name, just that he was with the circle. That was the phrase he used. No company name, no badge, just with the circle. The job was simple. On paper, soundproofing. I'd done plenty of it before. Podcast studios, home theaters, even a few underground panic rooms for high-profile folks. But this one was different. It wasn't just about dampening sound, it was about erasing it. They flew me in under a shell company, paid half in advance. I got dropped at the estate's south gate, never saw a main entrance. Just that massive iron archway with the camera that followed you no matter how slow you moved. Security didn't talk. They handed me a black guest badge with no name on it and pointed down a path lined with what looked like pine trees, but taller, manipulated somehow, like they'd been forced to grow in perfect columns. The house itself didn't hit me right away. It's not that it was ugly. It wasn't. It was sleek, modern, symmetrical, but sterile, like it was built for control, not comfort. Every corner was right-angled. Every room smelled like lemon oil and metal. There were no family pictures, no shoes by the door, just long white halls and a staff that walked like they were trying not to echo. I was assigned to West Wing B. The work order called it the Education Annex. 3 rooms, no windows, all connected through one central hallway with motion sensors I wasn't allowed to touch. The blueprints I was handed were vague, just black squares marked R1, R2, and R3. When I asked what kind of education these rooms were for, the guy beside me, a younger tech in a tucked-in polo, just said, "Legacy prep." Then he looked away. I started with R1. It looked like a normal small performance studio at first glance, except there were no speakers, no amps, no outlets even, just thick black carpeting that climbed up the walls and onto the ceiling, like the room had been swallowed in velvet. The lighting was a single strip above, and even that flickered slightly, like it didn't want to be on too long. I ran my hand along the wall and realized it wasn't real carpet. It was sound foam, the kind used in extreme isolation chambers. But this stuff was denser, more industrial, almost sticky in places, like it had absorbed too much. When I stood in the center of the room, I couldn't hear my own breathing. Well, it was like the room stole it. R2 had mirrors, but only on one wall, and I could tell immediately they weren't for the people inside the room. They were 2 ways, observation glass. I'd seen them before in high-end interrogation rooms. What threw me was how low they were placed, just a little above seated eye level, almost like the person behind the mirror wasn't meant to look down on the subject, but across, like they were equals or pretending to be. There were no chairs, no desk, just a faint smell of ammonia and 3 recessed floor lights that pulsed softly in a triangle. I don't know why that disturbed me more than anything else. Something about the way they blinked. Always 3 seconds apart, like a metronome for a performance no one could hear. R3 was locked when I got there. I radioed one of the assistants, a man named Jeremy, I think, and asked about the key. He said that one's above your tier, then added, "Don't worry, no one uses it anymore." But there were fresh footprints outside the door, small ones, barefoot. I started to notice patterns. Each night, when I'd finish up, I'd see someone in the hallway. A young girl, always dressed in white, hair tied up tight. She never spoke. Sometimes she stood by the wall like she was being punished. Other times, she sat on the floor sketching in a book she'd hide as soon as she heard steps. She didn't blink much, not unless she was looking at someone directly. I remember one night I got curious, stayed a little longer than I should have. I knew the security team rotated out every 3 hours, and I used that window to explore a bit further down the West Wing corridor. I passed a small alcove, almost missed it. There was a door with a red circle painted above the handle. No nameplate, just a laminated tag hanging from the knob that read, "Red Haze Suite." I'd seen a note about it on the original draft of the floor plan, but it had been whited out in the version they gave me. I didn't open it. I won't lie and say it was because I was scared. I was curious, but I knew that door wasn't meant to be opened, not by someone like me. When I returned to my station the next morning, my guest badge didn't work. They had a new contractor in my place by noon. I was escorted to a small room near the rear exit, handed a second NDA, this one thicker with clauses I'd never seen before. There was a new line highlighted in red: do not disclose or infer non-musical behavioral protocols. I asked what that meant. The man watching me didn't answer. He just pushed the pen across the table and said, "You'll want to stay useful, Mr. G." As engaged as when I knew. I wasn't hired to build anything. I was hired to not see it. When I left the estate, I found something folded in my tool case. A drawing, crude, sketched in pencil. It showed the red haze door, and next to it, a figure, childlike, with no face. Just a mouth, wide open, screaming. But there was no sound, just the image. That sketch stayed with me for years. I kept it hidden behind my licenses. I told myself it was a warning, a message from the girl. But now, I'm not so sure. Maybe it was a mirror. Maybe she wasn't warning me. Maybe she was reflecting me, the man who saw the silence, and kept walking anyway. You want my statement? You want the truth? Fine. Whatever that house was, it wasn't meant to be lived in. It was meant to remember you. Chapter 3, Rehearsal Footage. I never used my real name there. Nobody did. When you worked in post for Combs Holdings, they gave you a code. Mine was 1449K. My terminal login was a string of letters and numbers that didn't match any HR system I'd ever seen. I got paid through an offshore intermediary, and my direct supervisor only went by S. I was fine with it at the time. The pay was good, double what I made at my last editing job. The vault had top-of-the-line equipment, isolation booths, LTO drives, redundant servers on a private loop, and they let me work alone, which I preferred. I didn't ask questions. I didn't have to, until the Legacy Rehearsals folder showed up. It was dropped into the queue without a tag, no request ID, just a shortcut on my desktop one morning. The icon was a red spiral. Opened it. Inside were hundreds of video files, sorted by year and then by something called phase. I clicked one at random. Phase 2, Cycle 6. It opened with a countdown, 3 tones, descending, then a static flicker, like a VHS warming up. The girl was seated in the middle of a pale, empty room. Same one, every time. Cream-colored walls, fluorescent strip above her head, shadows shaped like crosses stretching across the floor. She didn't look at the camera directly, not yet. Just sat there, hands folded, eyes waiting for some signal. Then a voice, male, filtered, modulated so flat it felt like a synthetic whisper. Line 4B. The girl blinked twice, then said clearly and slowly, "I belong here now." Another pause. Line 4D. She repeated, "I forget on command." I watched hours of it. Variations. Dozens of takes where she was asked to mimic facial expressions from a monitor. Laugh when cued, cry when the lights flickered. One time, she was told to sit in silence while the room slowly darkened, then say, "It's okay, I'm only a rehearsal." No one clapped, no one spoke. In some of the footage, the audio was removed entirely, replaced with loops, not music exactly, but synthetic compositions, bass-heavy pulses, industrial clicks. Each file had a different one. Some were so low you couldn't hear them, just feel them, like a second heartbeat under your skin. I tried to cross-reference the file origins. No metadata, all scrubbed, even the date stamps were blank or marked as epic null. Whatever system had created them, it didn't come from our standard pipeline. One file stood out. MK3. It was buried inside Phase 4, but locked. Needed clearance I didn't have. I flagged it, marked it for escalation. I just wanted someone to check it before I accidentally corrupted it. An hour later, my terminal rebooted. When I logged back in, the legacy folder was gone. S called me into the side room. He didn't speak right away, just sat across from me, wearing mirrored glasses even though we were underground. He slid over a fresh NDA. No words, just pointed. I asked what I had flagged. He said, "Nothing you need to remember." I signed it. 2 days later, I was reassigned. No warning, no handoff, just a courier who handed me a padded envelope and instructions to return all company equipment. My badge was deactivated, my email wiped. The envelope held a check, final payment, and a post-it note with just one word: rest. I told myself it was over, but months later I found something in my glove compartment. I hadn't used the car in a while, wasn't even sure the battery would start, but the glove box popped open funny, like it had been messed with. Inside was a thumb drive, unmarked, red plastic casing, no branding. I plugged it into an old air-gapped laptop I keep for freelance. There was one file, no folder, no extension. When I forced it open, it played immediately. No player, no codec required. The girl was there again, sitting in the same chair. But this time, she looked straight at me. No countdown, no modulation. Just her, eyes wide, mouth closed. And then, clearly, tell them I was never supposed to exist. The clip cut out, no ending, no static. He played it again. But this time her mouth didn't move. Same frame, same eyes, no sound. I played it a third time, nothing. The fourth time, the screen went black and my laptop shut down, permanently fried. The drive was hot to the touch. I tried to forget about it, burned the drive, smashed the laptop, moved out of my place, got a new number. But sometimes, when I'm alone and it's quiet, I hear that synthetic heartbeat again, the low thrum, the mechanical breath. And I remember the girl's face, not scared, not broken, just practiced, like she'd said those words before, to others, maybe to hundreds of others, maybe to me, over and over, until I remembered them wrong. They called the folder Legacy Rehearsals, but it wasn't legacy, it wasn't rehearsal. It was proof that someone, maybe all of them, knew what she was, what she wasn't. And maybe that's why they erased it. Or maybe I never worked there. Maybe I was just the next phase. Chapter 5. The Room with No Exit. Entry 1, Day 2 of Intake. They gave me this journal, said it would help, that if I externalize the trauma, it becomes easier to analyze. I don't know about that, but I like the feel of the paper. It's soft, recycled, smells like a book that belonged to someone else before me. I'll start with what I can remember. The first real memory isn't a person or a name, it's a room. They called it the performance chamber. No one ever said it out loud to me. It was written once, stenciled in gray block letters above the inside of the door. The only door, the one I never saw open. It didn't have a knob, just closed, always closed. The walls were padded, beige, seamless. I thought maybe they were soft at first, but if you pressed hard enough, you'd feel the steel beneath. The lights never changed, harsh, buzzing, constant. One flickered for 3 weeks straight, right above the mirror. The mirror wasn't a mirror. It reflected, yes, but it didn't track. Sometimes I'd move my hand and the reflection wouldn't follow until seconds later. Sometimes it didn't follow at all. Sometimes I looked into it and it looked back. I was maybe 7 or 9, I don't know for sure. Ages didn't exist in that place. You were either too early or just right. I was told I was perfectly timed. There were cameras, one in each corner. They blinked red when they were recording. I used to count the blinks like stars. Some nights I'd blink with them, just so someone knew I was awake. They trained me in silence. Crying was only allowed if they triggered it. If I cried unprompted, I was reset. The resets happened in the soundless room next door. Nothing but white light and a chair that was too small for me. I wasn't allowed to talk unless the camera blinked twice. That meant a prompt was coming. Sometimes a phrase, sometimes a gesture. Once, they played a video of a woman crying on loop for hours. I was told to match her sorrow, but keep the elegance. I didn't know what that meant, so I practiced. I got good at it. Entry 3, Day 5. The handlers wore white, always white. No buttons, no zippers, no jewelry. Their faces were kind, but expressionless. I called one of them Mother once, and she blinked hard like it hurt to hear it. They corrected everything. My voice pitch, my posture, the angle of my smile. One of them had a clipboard where she drew little symbols I never understood. Spirals, mostly, some with dots in the middle, some open-ended. She said the spiral helped measure resistance levels. She once told me I had the lowest resistance score of any subject in Cycle 3. I was proud of that for a long time, until I realized what it meant. Entry 4, Day 9. There were parties upstairs. I couldn't see them, but I heard them. Every weekend, laughter, music, low thuds of bass that made the floor hum. Sometimes I'd hear clapping, or heels on marble, and sometimes a voice, his voice, booming with praise and performative joy. But it never reached my room. Only once did they let me watch. They brought in a screen, small like an old television on a rolling cart. It played a clip, no sound, of a party in the upper hall, everyone dressed in silver, masks, moving like dancers on a stage. In the center, a girl sat on a high chair. She looked like me. Same hair, same posture, same empty hands. I watched for 30 minutes before the screen turned off. When I asked if it was a recording or live, the handler said, "It doesn't matter. Your role isn't to witness, it's to reflect." I didn't ask again. Entry 6. Day 14. I tried to scream once. Just once. It was in the middle of a session where they'd made me repeat the same phrase 37 times. The memory is the mask. I remember to forget. I started saying it too fast, trying to get through it, and the walls felt like they were moving in. I thought if I screamed, they'd stop, or maybe I'd wake up from something I didn't know I was asleep inside. So I screamed, as loud as I could. Nothing changed. The speaker clicked on. A male voice, not his, but filtered through something mechanical, said, "Test of audience sensitivity initiated. Continue." That was the last time I made a sound without permission. Entry 7, Day 18. Sometimes I forgot what my real voice sounded like. They once had me practice crying silently, not sobbing, just the facial structure. Wrinkled brow, downturned mouth, tears on command. I was 8, or maybe 10. One handler gave me a mirror. Real this time, I think, and asked me to remember myself, but not too much. When I asked what that meant, she said, "The performance only works if you forget what it's for." I think I nodded, but I didn't understand. Entry 9, Day 23. They made me wear the white dress every day, sometimes changed the bows, never the color. I asked once for something else, anything. I said I liked blue. The handler paused, wrote something on her clipboard, then left. That night, I got no dinner, no lights, just darkness and the blinking red camera. I didn't ask again. Entry 10, Day 28. I had a dream, one where the door opened, not from the outside, but from the inside, like I had a handle I'd never noticed before. I opened it, and there was a hallway, long, black, cold. At the end was a mirror, but when I reached it, there was no reflection. Just the word written in fog. Beautiful. Entry 12, day 31. He came in once, just once. I didn't hear him approach. The door clicked. He stepped in, wearing all black, no jewelry, no cologne. He looked at me for a long time, then said, "When you smile without reason, that's when you're beautiful. That's when you're mine." He left before I could say anything.
The door closed, the lock clicked.
And I practiced the smile for 2 hours that night. Not because I wanted to, because I thought maybe if I did it right, I could leave. Final entry, page torn, bottom corner burned. I'm not sure if this is real, if this book is mine, if these memories are mine. But if they are, if any of this happened, then someone needs to see what it made me. I found a pen in the drawer last night. I drew it again. The spiral, 3 loops. Black ink. This time, I put it on a sketch, one I've had in my head for years. Is it courtroom? Empty. No judge, no jury, no guards. Just me, sitting in the defendant's chair, smiling, like he taught me, like I never left the room. Because maybe I didn't. Maybe the room never ended. Maybe the door was never real. Just a mirror telling me I was someone worth remembering. If I could just forget. Unit 37452, 54. Entire report, observation log, Meek Brooklyn Shoe. Subject, inmate 37,452, 54. Prepared by Redacted Federal Investigative Services. Classification. Previously sealed, now unclassified for internal audit. I was assigned to monitor inmate 37,452 343 weeks after his transfer to the Special Housing Unit at MDC Brooklyn. The man known publicly as Sean Combs, here referred to only by his BOP ID, had by that time already stopped responding to his legal team. His meals remained untouched. He spoke rarely, but when he did, it was always the same set of phrases, said in patterns that almost resembled rehearsed monologue. He doesn't speak to guards. He doesn't request books, showers, or medication. His bed is made with almost unnatural precision. Tightened corners, folded linens, rolled socks centered like props on a stage. But that's not what drew attention. It was what he did at night. At first, officers noted him tapping the wall 3 times, always the same rhythm, just before lights out. Then came the whispering. Not full sentences, just fragments. Rehearsal's over. Very good. Exercising has been shown to reduce both mental and physical pain, absolute mood and bloat. Libido, the ability to draw the spiral too early. We had audio recordings for review, but in all cases the playback came corrupted, static overlays, echo loops. Occasionally, we'd hear his voice layered over itself, as if it were recorded twice from 2 different timelines. Analysts flagged it as an AV error. The tech team said it was impossible, that the system doesn't allow dual feeds from a single input. Then came the wall writing. No pens, no pencils, no blood, just his finger, dragging it along the cinder block wall, as if etching something only he could see. I reviewed the cell myself. Nothing visible. But under thermal imaging, you could make out faint pressure trails, spirals, in rows, not random, 3 loops per mark, like a code repeated over and over. A few days later, he began pulling the sheets from his bunk and twisting them into letters. Always the same too. 7C. He'd fold them neatly and place them at the foot of his bed. Guards were instructed to confiscate them after lights out, but each time, the same letters would return the next day, even with sheets replaced. The correctional officer on rotation during one such instance filed a report stating he witnessed the sheets untwist themselves and reform into the same characters while Combs sat unmoving in the corner. That officer was reassigned. No further report was allowed from him. I requested a broader behavioral audit. The warden declined, citing pending external limitations. Then, one of the night staff flagged an issue with the surveillance footage, a specific frame time-stamped at 2:47 and 33 seconds, during which Combs appeared to stand, face the camera directly, and mouth a phrase. That frame was flagged automatically by the AI moderation system for visual duplication error. When we pulled the footage manually, it refused to play. The file would load, buffer, and then display only black with a single line of text flashing in a corrupted typeface. She's not my daughter. She's the script. The AV department confirmed the file was native to the system. No external device interference, no human edit. But it could not be replayed. Each time we tried, the system froze, and the segment became unreadable. We submitted the file to the National Archive for anomaly classification. 3 days later, I received a physical envelope in my mailbox, no return address. Inside was a single photograph, an image of a courtroom sketch, the kind you see in sealed hearings, crude pastel, shaky hands. The scene depicted a trial chamber, high ceiling, no windows. There were no people except for a girl seated in the defendant's chair. She was smiling, but her face was familiar. Too familiar. She matched the child from the Red Haze footage, from the thumb drive the digital archivist tried to bury, from the butter spiral on the chef's napkin. Her face had traveled across testimony, across facilities, across sealed files. And now, somehow, it was in my mailbox. The back of the photo had no words, just the same spiral, 3 loops, drawn in red ink center-filled. I flagged the sketch for chain of custody review, but before the request could be filed, the image vanished from my desk. The physical envelope still exists, but the photo is gone. I asked around. No one admitted to taking it. The correctional staff refused to enter his cell now without backup. They say the air in there feels wrong, thick, like sound hangs longer than it should. I visited once. Briefly, he sat on his bed, hands folded, looking at the wall. He didn't speak, but when I turned to leave, he whispered. He woke up. That wasn't supposed to happen. I turned back. He was staring at the mirror across from his bunk, the one used for inmate monitoring. But he wasn't looking at himself. He was looking past it, like he saw something behind the glass. Item, unfiled. I have requested to be pulled from this case. The memories are becoming unpredictable. I reviewed a transcript this morning from a court hearing I was never assigned to. It contained my name. It also contained a sketch, one I know I never drew, showing me sitting in the courtroom gallery, watching her, smiling. I don't know if I belong to this memory anymore, or if it belongs to me. But I know one thing. She remembers us, and that, more than anything, is what's undoing him. Chapter 7. The testimony no one asked for. There were only 12 of us in the room. That's all they allowed. The rest were told to wait in adjacent holding chambers or to leave entirely. No press, no streaming, no court artist. Not this time. This wasn't for headlines. This was something else. I don't know why I was selected. I wasn't on any formal witness list, at least not one I ever signed. But I got the notice anyway. Sealed envelope, gold tape on the flap, no return address, just a sentence printed in small block letters. You've seen her before, now hear her. They didn't call her by name when she entered. The bailiff just nodded and the door opened. She walked in slowly, wearing white, not a dress this time, a plain jacket, soft slacks, hair down, no makeup. Her presence was quiet but heavy, like fog that hadn't lifted in years. Some people in the room shifted in their seats. One of the older men, I think he was from a security background, actually whispered, "No way," like he'd seen a ghost. I kept my eyes on the floor. She sat without being prompted. There was no opening statement, no lawyer beside her, just the judge at the bench, hands folded, watching her like she was more artifact than witness. The clerk asked if she swore to tell the truth. She answered softly, "If I can remember it." No one laughed. The silence in the room was not tense, it was reverent, like we were in the presence of something sacred or something dangerous. She began by speaking about the house, not just the structure, but its function, how each room had a purpose that didn't match its name. The theater with no stage, the studio with no instruments, the bedroom with no clock. She described the soundproof chambers in vivid detail, down to the seams in the padding and the direction the lights hummed when they were testing her limits. She said, the house wasn't for living, it was for learning how to not be. She spoke without pause, no script, no notes, just the voice of someone who had waited years to say something out loud. He talked about the dinners, about how the silverware was always cold, how the guests never made eye contact, how her chair was designed to keep her posture locked in place. She remembered the plates she never touched, the way the wine glasses were filled but never sipped. It wasn't food, she said. It was blocking. Stage direction, everyone had a mark. She described the masks. Not literal ones, not always, but the faces people wore. The smiles that didn't reach eyes, the nods timed to invisible cues. She said, they rehearsed what to forget. I rehearsed how to remember. Someone near me cleared their throat and immediately looked ashamed. The noise felt like a sin. She spoke about identity shifts, how her name changed depending on who was visiting, how sometimes she was a niece, other times a protege, a godchild, an artistic vessel. Never a daughter, not really. He called me his legacy, she said, but only when the cameras were nearby. The rest of the time, I was just silence. The judge asked a question, first one of the session. Were there others? She didn't hesitate. Yes. Some older, some younger, some stayed for a season, some were sent away. Where? Her voice broke just slightly for the first time. I don't know, but they didn't come back. She paused, looked down at the floor, then reached into her bag, a soft canvas thing with frayed straps, and pulled out a sketchbook. It was worn, corners curled, spine cracked. She placed it on the table in front of her, then opened it. Page after page, courtrooms. Not real ones, not copies of this room. Interpretations, abstract shapes, high ceilings, oversized judges, audience members with blank faces or no mouths. But in every sketch, one thing was consistent. She was there, always in the same place, always the only one not wearing a mask. She turned the book toward the bench and pushed it forward. The judge reached for it, but didn't touch it yet. She said, "You don't need to believe me, but I need you to remember me, because he made me forget myself on purpose." That's when it happened. The clerk, the one who'd been typing all session, stopped and stared at her screen. I caught a glimpse over her shoulder. The transcript line she'd just entered had duplicated itself. but not identically. The second version read, "Because I made me forget myself on purpose." No one said anything. No one moved. Then the screen went black. The sketchbook stayed open on the table, the page showing a courtroom with rows of empty seats and one girl smiling at the center. Her eyes were too detailed, like they were drawn from memory. And maybe they were. The judge finally lifted the gavel. He didn't speak. He just tapped it once. The sound echoed, not because it was loud, but because it was the only thing anyone had dared to do all day. The girl stood. No instructions, no signal. She walked to the door and waited. A bailiff moved to open it, hesitated, then stepped aside. She exited without looking back. The sketchbook was left behind. The room sat in silence until the lights above flickered once, just once, and returned to stillness. Nobody spoke for a full minute, and even when we stood to leave, we walked like we were trying not to wake something. Whatever had just happened here wasn't testimony, it was remembrance, and no one had asked for it. But now that it was in us, it wasn't leaving. Chapter 8. Her real name was... It was late, past midnight, the kind of hour where the building feels hollow, echoes last longer, fluorescents hum louder. In the Federal Archive basement, you learn not to make noise, even the printers whisper. The documents are always cold to the touch, no matter the temperature. I was on review duty, last rotation of the night. Redact, refile, reroute, the usual cycle. This case was sealed from the start. No one argued, no headlines, just box after box with bar-coded seals and top-sheet warnings stamped in dark red. Clearance level cycle, 3 cycle 3, non-citable memory files. The label didn't make sense. Not legally, not even bureaucratically. Non-citable memory. No training had covered what to do with that, but the rules said process, so I processed. Box 11A contained testimony transcripts. Most pages were routine, identifiers stripped, placeholder names, long blocks of monologue in black ink. It was the kind of material you could read through without absorbing, like scanning a play where every actor used the same voice. Then I reached the bottom of the pile. An invoice, not labeled, not listed in the inventory manifest, just cream-colored, sealed with red wax, melted into a crude spiral. I shouldn't have opened it. It wasn't logged, not coded, but something about the weight of it, too light to be official, too heavy to ignore, made my hand move before I could think twice. Inside was a single photograph. A girl, late teens, maybe early 20s, sitting at a table. Her posture was straight, chin tilted down just enough to be intentional. In her lap was a sketchbook, closed. But her fingers were splayed across the cover, like she wanted to keep it that way. She was smiling, but not happily. It was the kind of smile you wear when someone tells you to smile, and you want them to know you're doing it only because they said to. On the back of the photo there was handwriting. Elegant, almost too neat to be real. Her name wasn't legacy. It wasn't adopted. It wasn't replacement. Her name was... The last part was burned away, charred clean through. I stared at the hole, at the ring of ash around it. For a second, I thought I could still smell smoke. I placed the photo down and turned back to my terminal. It was blinking. That had never happened before. The entire screen had gone black except for a single folder, now pulsing at the center. Cycle 3, final draft. No one had uploaded anything. I opened it. A transcript appeared. Just one line, short. She was made to remember us all, so we'd never forget who made her forget. I blinked. My ears felt full, like I'd just come up from underwater. Then the screen blacked out again. I checked the power, still on. The mouse didn't work. Keyboard unresponsive. Then the lights flickered. Just once. From behind me, the archive door made a sound. A soft click. Not open, not yet, but something shifted in the lock. I turned my head slowly. There was no one in the hallway. The door hadn't moved. But I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Carved into the metal handle, not drawn, not scratched, but carved, was a spiral. 3 loops. Perfectly symmetrical. I stood and backed away, heart knocking against my ribs. I reached for the photo, but it was gone. Only a faint outline remained where it had rested. I told myself to breathe, to think. But then a line from the transcript repeated in my mind, not as text, but in a voice. My own. Reading it. The screen had shown me reading it. Not me. I opened the drawer beneath my terminal, just to feel grounded, just to see something I recognized. Inside was a folded napkin. White. Clean. In the corner, drawn in red, the same spiral. Underneath, a sentence in that same elegant hand. He wasn't the daughter. He was the evidence. I slammed the drawer shut, then sat there, listening to the silence that had stopped feeling like silence. I don't know how long I stayed like that, but the blinking on my screen never returned. The lights never flickered again, and the door, though never opened, never clicked shut either. It just stayed, waiting.